Vengeance is power. Those who seek retribution at all costs are the most fearsome of warriors, hunting their target driven by spite and anger. Many have wielded vengeance, but none have mastered it like the great Dakkon Blackblade. His slaughter is legendary. His legacy haunts all the planes of magic, and his blade has felled thousands. This man is the Shadow Slayer, the Dark Avenger, the master blacksmith who forged the strongest blade in the history of Magic the Gathering, the Blackblade itself. A sword that could fell elder dragons in a single strike, so fearsome that even the great dragon god Nicol Bolas fears its god-rending powers. I would say that without question, Dakkon is undoubtedly the most metal man in all of Magic, outside of Karn, of course, the man literally made of metal. Having read through a lot of the Magic lore at this point, I've come to a very simple conclusion on Dakkon. This dude is freaking sick, man. He is pretty much the Doomslayer of the Blind Eternities, going absolutely berserk on those who stop his hunt for the demonic planeswalker Gaedron Dihada. Truly, I feel like no one has a darker legacy than Big Bad Dakkon here. This butcher is Edge. He is Dread itself. He's the embodiment of badassery. The sword, the armor, the violent personality, and the tiny temper, but he's also got a real enigma. One of the old-gen planeswalkers, this dude has some absolutely broken power. Healing magic, the ability to banish creatures in lore, plus an insane boost of physical raw strength. And while he is a black mana planeswalker, he does have access to white and blue mana as well. Probably because he's a demon slayer hell-bent on controlling his own fate that he's been robbed of. And that splash of white and blue actually shows some real humanity at his core, and possibly even an amount of order and control that he has as a servant. But the darkness that has clearly consumed this man on his conquest is obviously, while black mana is his most defining color. Now obviously we just cannot talk about Dakkon without talking about his most legendary achievement, his weapon, the Black Blade. A weapon so powerful it was relegated to being wielded by its user in cards, only finally getting an artifact card of its own, the Black Blade Reforged in 2018 during the Dominaria return set. And that's despite first being created in 1994 for the Dakkon Blackblade original card. That is some absolute serious legacy, and somehow it keeps coming back. The blade that Dakkon forged has slaughtered countless souls throughout long stretches of time, but how did it ever come to be? And who is this dark and twisted warrior who roams the plains who actually created it? Who or what could have caused all this madness? Let's find out together in Blood. Shadow Slayer and Soul Drinker. Before the Dread Knight, Dakkon Blackblade was a planeswalker, he was just a humble working man. Well, maybe not super humble, because on the plane of Dominaria, you know, the like uber famous main plane of Magic the Gathering that just covers all the classic fantasy genres, yeah, that's Dominaria. Dakkon is from there and was known as a master blacksmith and a brutal warrior. Now that infamy led to the most important encounter in his entire life. You see, when you can forge insanely powerful weapons in Magic the Gathering, master manipulators in need of some extra firepower come running to none other than you. And one of the nastiest came to seek Dakkon's services, Gaedron Dihada. She was a legendary planeswalker in the post-Brothers War era after the great battle between Urza and his brother Mishra that pretty much messed up the entire multiverse. I kind of have a video on that. It's not super important to the story of Dakkon, but just so you have an idea of when in the storyline this roughly takes place. Anyways, the great villainess Dihada saw something inside of Dakkon immediately. Not just insane ambition, but frightening potential. She sensed the spark of a planeswalker sleeping within him, and rather than awaken it naturally, she chose to mold him into a weapon first. Her offer was pretty simple. Forge the most powerful blade in existence, and she would grant him unimaginable power in return. She would turn him into a planeswalker like herself. And then, to literally no one's surprise, Dakkon agreed to this. All he had to do was make a really strong sword, and that would turn him into a near god. Hell yeah, now that's what I call a bargain. But it turns out that creating the Black Blade required a lot more than just skill at a forge. He needed to throw a little bit of dark magic pizzazz into it as well. But luckily, Dihada was willing to teach Dakkon the forbidden sorceries that would turn the weapon into a soul drinker, a blade that absorbed the life and strength of everything it killed. With the dark magic secured and nothing but a hammer and a dream, Dakkon got to work. He stood at his forge every single day for 10 years crafting this single blade, hammering, shaping, heating, and tending to this dark weapon. Each time the sword was reheated, he cooled it not with water and oil, but blood. The blood of a poor slave. He'd drive the blade through their ribcage, cooling it, all while feeding the soul of the slain to his wicked magic. Yeah, this one took a really dark turn real fast. So, kill after kill, sacrifice after sacrifice, the weapon kept growing stronger, and so did Dakkon's obsession. He would become a planeswalker at the cost of anything and anyone close to him. It's actually said that he sacrificed his own son to the blade's hunger so that he could manage to complete it. Rest in peace, Dakkon Jr. Your dedication to the cause has been seen, heard, and completely disregarded. Now, by the time that the Black Blade was actually finally finished, it no longer resembled a weapon forged by mortal hands. It looked like a vile steel thorn ready to drain the blood of men, dragons, and gods alike. Now, of course, just to make sure the blade really was that nasty with it, Dakkon went on a relentless slaughter spree, slicing through hordes of Dominarians to make sure that he actually, smoothed the edges all nice and good-like. Happy to know that one person can forge a Black Blade and explain how it works. Way to avoid the fraud allegations there, Dakkon, I guess. With every single enemy slain, his power surged even more. Just like me during my squat, strength flooded his body as the blade devoured the souls of the fallen. It was kind of like his creatine, but more creatine. His assaults became so brutal and bloody and overwhelming that stories spread across the land of a warrior consumed by a black sword. At this point, he was no longer the great smith Dakkon, he had become Dakkon Blackblade. And then, as you might expect, homegirl Dihada returned to claim her weapon. After all, he did not make this blade to slaughter, he made it to become a planeswalker. The slaughter was just kind of some, necessary beta testing. Now, as all good manipulators do, Dihada returned and followed through on her promise. She did ignite Dakkon's planeswalker spark by immediately turning the Black Blade onto Dakkon. She plunged the Black Blade into Dakkon's shadow, forever binding his soul to the weapon itself, stealing some of it for herself too, but she did not take his life. He was still alive, now a planeswalker, but his soul was forfeit already, chained to the very bloody blade that he had created. Dihada's goal was of course the Black Blade, but in the end she also made Dakkon her weapon as well. She vanished, taking the Black Blade with her, and left Dakkon to wander. curious as to why she would let him live. What benefit might he still have to serve? Why make him immortal just to vanish? Dakkon, the Dragon Slayer. Our Dark Knight homeboy here wandered for many years, probably punching people here and there, but eventually, Dihada reared her ugly face once again. The demon planeswalker once more began manipulating the plane of Dominaria, this time setting her eyes on the island of Corondor for her own amusement. Corondor is located right, here on the map, just north of Jamura, where Zalfia and Teferi are from, amongst some others. And what you need to know is that Dihada had at this point just escalated into open warfare, devastating kingdoms across the region, and leaving entire nations in ruin. She wanted that Corondor like I want a cortado, yummy cortado, pretty good drink. To conquer it, she unleashed another one of her demon servants, the dreaded Sol Kanar. Here he is, remember him? Sol Kanar works for Dihada, Slate Karth. One of her many victims was a young thief from the destroyed kingdom of Karth, who, for all intents and purposes, we can just call the Son of Karth. I promise this will be more relevant to Dakkon in just a moment. The Son of Karth met a magical, mysterious monk in prison who did not offer him the Devil's Lettuce, but instead guided him and helped him escape that prison, which is a lot more useful, I would say. Unknowingly, leading Karth down a very wild, wacky, and fate-defining path. The monk teleported him, don't ask how just yet, I'll explain it later, to Gaedron's library, where Dihada stored her strongest artifacts and tomes. The Son of Karth then found a grimoire capable of summoning Dakkon and a magical relic, the Amulet of Tifu, which could bind Dakkon to his service. So Big Boy here used the evil book, summoned Dakkon, and then the amulet that robbed Dakkon of his ability to planeswalk away and bound him to the Son of Karth, binding one of the most powerful beings in existence to a mortal boy. I know I may have been using an adult card art for him, but trust, he's a kid. I mean, look at the comic art. Naturally, Dakkon did not, exactly take this very well. He did not like the binding. This was not consensual BDSM. This was actual soul enslavement. No kink shaming, but I think it's worse. Dakkon initially attempted to kill Karth outright and free himself from the amulet's control, but the artifact actually protected the young thief, forcing Dakkon into servitude. Down, boy. Down. All right. Now, as you may have guessed, Dakkon changed his mind pretty quickly after hearing that the Son of Karth's true enemy was Dihada. Suddenly, they started looking more like Ash Ketchum and Evil Pikachu, roaming Dominaria in search of all 8 gym badges so they could, whoop champion Dihada, sorry but. Dihada, of course, also on her end, wasn't having any of this though, so she sent her servant, Sol Kanar, you remember him, the Swamp King, a corrupted Maro sorcerer, to destroy both of them. If you don't know, a Maro sorcerer is just a literal force of nature summoned and given some physical form. So Sol Kanar isn't just a king of the swamp, he is the swamp as a king, I guess. If you remember from earlier, Sol Kanar's immense power is what actually destroyed the entire city of Karth, the Son of Karth's home. And so his new best friends, Dakkon, obliterated Sol Kanar, reminding him that Mr. Blackblade was the strongest servant of Dihada without any question. And apparently, since Dihada had no more other shenanigans up her sleeve, she finally appeared herself. Now, I do like that the final boss just shows up right away. One-shot comics are just very nice when it comes to this plot movement, right? Continuing my Pokemon analogy also, Dihada was a dragon-taming champion like Lance, and she summoned 2 legendary elder dragons, Piru and Chromium, which means it was now a 2v1, or I guess a 1.5 if you do want to count the Son of Karth, which I think we can not. But these are the siblings of Ugin and Bolas. Piru and Chromium are mighty elder dragons enslaved by Dihada, and this was just gonna be a bloodbath. Dakkon instantly banished Chromium from the battlefield, showcasing the absurd scale of his old-gen planeswalker power. These guys were beyond broken. That means that the board state was now Dakkon Blackblade and the Son of Karth, which is kind of like, I imagine, like a 1/1 like citizen token, I guess, versus Piru and Dihada. Dakkon shared blows with Piru, while Karth managed to reclaim the Blackblade from Dihada amidst the scuffle. Don't ask me why. Returning it to Dakkon, Dakkon then equipped the blade, gaining probably like +3/+3, and Dakkon struck down Piru. Now, in lore, the Elder Dragon Piru's death actually unleashed such an overwhelming explosion of magical energy that it literally carved the massive dueling chasm of Gulthanor into the land itself. But also in that moment, the horrifying truth was finally revealed. This was the moment that Dihada had been painstakingly crafting for years. The entire conflict, including the Son of Karth and Dakkon's journey, had been completely orchestrated to allow Dihada to absorb Piru's soul and increase her own demonic power. The forging of the Blackblade, Dakkon's servitude, Solkanar's death, all of this was her game all along. Turns out that yes, she was the mysterious monk who helped Karth escape prison. That was secretly Dihada the entire time, which we should have kind of realized considering he had access to her spell library somehow. Dakkon, realizing this, attacked her in fury, but despite all of his strength, he could not overcome her completely now that she had absorbed the power of Piru for herself. Dihada then marked him once again, declaring that he would remain her servant forever. And still yet, in the aftermath, Karth noticed something that Dakkon had overlooked. For the first time since Dihada had cursed him so long ago, Dakkon's shadow had now returned. He was whole once again, but still kind of served her. Also, if you're looking to serve me a little bit of extra help here, if you're on mobile right now, consider sliding to the right of the like button and hit that hype button. It is crazy helpful, it turns out, on getting a channel like this that's still very small, you know, a little bit more notoriety. If you do that, thanks a ton. Really, really appreciate it. Moving on now. The legacy of the Black Blade. Now, this is not the last time that we see Dakkon, because eventually he and the Son of Karth, now known as Karth the Lion due to his bravery and bashness, would eventually split, and Karth would go on to create one of the Dominarian mega families. You might know them, the Karthalians, which turns out we just learned about recently in the Black Lotus video here, and it's just so funny to realize the name of the family is based on Karth the Lion. Karthalian, right? Karth the Lion, you get it? Eventually, Dihada would then be involved in the Planeswalker War. Dakkon also participated, at some point meeting Karth's descendant, Jared Karthalian, a mighty planeswalker in his very own right. And that's the last that we see of him in the story so far. But he is ageless and crazy powerful. His legacy so vast, he even has a doppelganger in Dungeons & Dragons lore because his character is just that cool. But don't get it confused, Magic's Dakkon is out there wandering still, one day bound to return, especially because his blade needs to be reforged and Dihada is hunting for him as well. You see, at some point, Dakkon gave up the Black Blade, either giving it up or passing it onto Korlash, the heir of the Black Blade. It's actually been theorized that Korlash is Dakkon's descendant, but that's kind of still all up in the air. The evil, spooky heir. The blade, though, eventually made its way to the demon Belzenok. You may know him as one of the demons who worked for Nicol Bolas, who had a demonic pact with Liliana Vess. Then Gideon Jura, the goated white mana planeswalker, slayed Belzenok, claiming the Blackblade for himself, ascending to the mighty Gideon Blackblade, and then the blade shattered against the might of Nicol Bolas, who realized its insane power after it was used to slaughter his kin, Piru. And now it remains in pieces within the Museum of Ravnica, but I have a sneaky suspicion that very soon, Dakkon may return to reforge his blade once again to take up arms against Dihada, who, as recently as the new invasion of Phyrexia across the multiverse, has actually begun meddling in Dominaria once again, trying to, yes, conquer Corondor and clashing with Jared Carthalion. She actually did so hoping to lure out Dakkon, and all that remains now is for our Dread Knight to remake his Black Blade and finally end his torturous legacy. I would say undeniably his weapon is legendary, but is it the strongest artifact in Magic the Gathering? I'm not so sure. It's very powerful, but how does it compare to the likes of the Immortal Sun or the Golgothian Silex? Well, if you want to find out that, you should check out this video where I cover some of Magic's craziest artifacts, including the legendary blade of Dakkon himself. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.